Over the past few weeks, I've watched hours of Nikocado Avocado. Screaming, crying, pooping, it was pure madness. And from all of that watching, I determined one thing. Nikocado Avocado's story isn't a fairy tale, it's a tragedy. Originally, this video was going to cover why Nikocado is hated, but as I dove further into the Nick lore, I was genuinely surprised by the difference in what YouTubers say he does and what he actually does. Don't get me wrong, Nick is insane. I think most of us can agree on that. It's clear he's mentally unwell and likely needs help, but for him to be one of the internet's most hated celebrities is unjustified. Through my hours of watching, and I do mean hours, it's been incessant farts, sharts, yelling, crying, tantrums, and whatever else his body produces, but not once did he say something that merits the hate he's received. Actually, watching Nick completely disproved a lot of the preconceived assumptions I'd made about him. In his interviews with other famous YouTuber Oompaville, Nick shows a lot of care and compassion for others. You know, when he wasn't shitting himself. He showed a real human side, and in combination with him being a fascinating entertainer, he's genuinely an incredible creator. Do I think Nick is normal? Of course not. Do I think Nick needs help? Absolutely. But to call him a villain or even find a reason to actually hate him is unjustifiable. So is he the terrible villain everyone seems to think he is? Is it all just an act? Just a character? Is Nikocado an unequivocal genius who's tricked millions of people for views, or is he just insane? What led to Nikocado Avocado's sudden transformation, and does he deserve the criticism he's received? I'll warn you, this isn't some happy, upbeat video covering Nikocado, because his story is anything but that. Betrayal, lies, mental illness, his story is tragic, and when you put all the pieces together, his dangerous transformation starts to make sense. The crying, the meltdowns, the shitting, all of it starts to connect when you look just a little closer. This is the Nikocado Avocado tragedy, a character analysis. To understand Nikocado Avocado, we first have to understand his supposed actor. But who is he? Nicholas Perry was born May 19th, 1992. He was born in Ukraine before being adopted by an American family in his infancy. Early on, he was told of his adoption, and he struggled to come to terms with his biological parents' decision to give him up. And in an interview with YouTuber Trisha Paytas, Nikocado shared he was diagnosed with ADD and OCD while being prescribed antidepressants at just 7 years old. A pretty hefty diagnosis for so early on in someone's life. He also shared how he likes the spotlight, a trait that undoubtedly followed him into adulthood. Nick would begin playing the violin at a young age, and throughout his youth he would practice. Eventually, he reached a level of excellence that got him accepted into the Catholic University of America, and eventually he'd attempt to play professionally. His violin playing was a way he could express himself, a way to cope with everything around him. Despite the constant inconsistencies in his life, the violin was one constant he could always rely on. But eventually, after his rapid weight gain, he replaces playing with a more destructive coping mechanism. Later, he then met Orlin through a vegan Facebook group, who was, for better or worse, his inseparable partner. Orlin would later visit Nick after months of online communication, eventually meeting up at Woodstock's music festival. For a few years, Nick had been trying to make it as a freelance violinist in New York, but he found it impossible to stand out from the plethora of other talented musicians. So, he decided to move to Colombia with Orlin, where the pair would live for 3 years. Throughout his time in Colombia, Nick would continue his veganism and violin playing while living a relatively happy life with Orlin, but something just wasn't right. Sure, he had his passions and he had his partner, but he didn't have meaningful work. So, he created a YouTube channel, and on May 27th, 2014, Nikocado Avocado was born. Now, originally, Nick's channel was just a general vlog channel where he'd share his vegan lifestyle and violin playing. It wasn't anything crazy, and it just seemed to be a fun way for Nick to share his passions. However, after a few years, Nikocado's veganism began to betray him, and with it, so did the vegan community. He developed hypoglycemia, a vitamin B12 deficiency, a rotted tooth, low energy, and worse, all as a result of veganism. And within the vegan community, he was constantly harassed for never being vegan enough. So in September of 2016, he left, and less than 2 months later, he would upload a video titled My First Mukbang. It didn't gain millions of views instantly. Most videos don't, but it got tens of thousands, which at the time was a lot for Nick. So he made another, then another. He began to grow at a rate he'd never experienced before, and for him, it was addicting. So why stop? Over the next 6 years, Nikocado would become infamous for consuming inconceivable quantities of food. Literal piles of what's best described as sludge came with the mukbangs, and Nikocado's extremely rapid weight gain ensued. In less than 6 years, he'd go from a relatively healthy 160 pounds to somewhere between 330 and 370 pounds. His weight gain was rapid, but more importantly, it was dangerous.
I'm on a path of destruction, and I'm aware of it, and I don't care.
Nick himself has stated numerous health issues as a result of his weight gain, like breaking his rib, having 2 heart attacks, and labeling himself as disabled. He now uses a scooter to move around as it's become increasingly difficult for Nick to walk, and his overall quality of life has become alarmingly low. Both his physical and mental health have worsened, causing a multitude of unintended side effects. Throughout his 6-year transformation, Nick's become irrational, bipolar, violent at times, and clearly his underlying mental disorders have only worsened with his weight gain. That's not to say Nick was always the most stable person, but there's a clear contrast between him now and him less than 5 years ago, and the content within his videos have reflected that downward spiral. His videos have become pure chaos. Constant screaming, crying, incessant flatulation. There's no end to the chaos in his videos, and they've become increasingly insane. Throughout their 40 to 50 minute run times, Nick's videos feature actions and experiences that you usually only find in satirical parodies. They start with him shopping, where he and Orlin venture into a wild Walmart and yell at each other. Next, they cook, where once again, they yell at each other. And finally, they feast, where you guessed it, they yell at each other, then they hit each other, then they make out, and then Nick shits himself. So yeah, I mean, his videos are undoubtedly absurd, but his thumbnails, those are even crazier. Although admittedly, Nick never clickbaits. Anything you see happening in his thumbnail is in the video, whether it's sucking on his husband, consuming 20,000 calories, or just plain shitting his pants. His thumbnails are never fake. Exaggerated? Maybe a little, but definitely not clickbait. So why is Nikocado hated? I mean, you always hear how despised Nikocado Avocado is, or why he's the villain of YouTube, but I can't find any reason to back it up. Some people have pointed out his relationship with his ex-husband, and yeah, it's obviously toxic, but technically that's his private life even if it's on camera. Neither are being held hostage, and both could theoretically leave if they really wanted. Of course, it's not that simple, but it's not forced, so there's no reason to hate Nikocado for his toxic relationship with his ex-husband. It's his relationship and his relationship alone, not the internet's. Another reason I see people hate on Nick is for the drama that he supposedly causes. Whether it be with other creators or his own viewers, Nick is consistently one of the most polarizing people on YouTube. There's always at least one person talking about him, whether it be good or bad. He's been exposed for gaslighting, lying, exploiting, bullying, and more. And obviously I can't 100% deny any of that, but from what I've seen from Nick on camera, it's more likely that creators are lying for views or taking his actions a little too seriously. And Nick is very rarely the start of his drama. 99% of the time, it's other people talking about him, not the other way around. But when Nick responds, that's when he's the bad guy. In fairness, most of what people talk about is his rapid weight gain and their concern for his health, which is justified. But others calling him out for his irrational behavior or his supposed bullying are likely exaggerating their interactions with him. So, is it his toxic relationship? Is it the drama he's involved in, or is it the character theory? A common point I see brought up about Nick is that he's playing a character, that he's exaggerating his reactions for the camera. I mean, literally, you can find 100 people mentioning it in any comment section, and if you search Nikocado Avocado character, thousands of videos about him breaking character pop up. The point is, people believe Nikocado Avocado is a character and that Nicholas Perry is the genius who plays him, but I don't think that's 100% true. I've seen, at this point, maybe close to 20 hours of him, and let me tell you something about Nikocado Avocado. This man shows everything. He shows his mental breakdowns, he shows his toxic and abusive relationship. I mean, this man literally spreads his asshole for OnlyFans and posts it online. He doesn't have anything to hide. Nicholas Perry is Nikocado Avocado. It's just Nikocado Avocado isn't 100% Nicholas Perry. Of course, in his videos he overreacts because that keeps people watching, but at the end of the day, he doesn't have to exaggerate it by much. In Nikocado's interview with Oompaville, he was asked whether or not he plays a character, and he denied it. He claimed it's degrading and kind of insulting to assume that him being himself is a character. Oomp backed him up by saying Nick doesn't play a character, he's just genuinely insane. Nick then corrected him, citing mental illness as a cause for his unorthodox behavior. Now, I do get the point. Why in the hell would anyone in their right mind act the way that Nick does? But that's the thing. He's clearly not in a healthy state of mind. I'm not a doctor, so I couldn't even begin to tell you the specifics of Nick's issues, but it's clear Nick's mental health is in jeopardy just as much, if not more, than his physical health. It's just worsened over the past 6 years, and it's not showing any signs of getting better. But as for a character, it's pretty clear 90% of Nikocado is actually himself. So what about the other 10%? And yeah, that part is a character. The parts of his videos where he's screaming over literally anything or when he's hunched over waddling around, that is a character. Of course it is. It's funny. It keeps you hooked. It's the same thing every YouTuber in the world does. It's what I'm doing to you right now. Everyone on YouTube, to some degree, no matter how small it is playing a character to keep you, the viewer, entertained. That's the whole point of YouTube, to keep people engaged. Nick's found what works for him, and yes, his mental and physical health are dramatically suffering as a result. But it's his choice. If you don't like him, don't watch him. If you don't support his dangerous decisions, don't watch him. It's genuinely the best thing you can do to help him. But honestly, I don't think it matters. Because sadly, most of his loyal fan base doesn't actually care about his health the way you or I do. If his mukbangs stop, he'll lose a large percentage of his viewership. But if he keeps going, the views keep coming. It's this endless paradox, and I don't envy Nick's position. I imagine if he started a true weight loss journey, it would actually break the internet, and he'd not only keep a lot of his viewers, but he'd bring in a plethora of new ones. Of course, that's all hypothetical. Nick stopped binge eating today. There's no proof or reason to believe he'd remain even half as successful as he is right now. And it's honestly tragic. From the hours of content I've seen, it seems Nick is actually a pretty good human. He usually speaks to people with a decent amount of respect and compassion, and treats others pretty well. It's just usually overlooked for funny clips of him yelling. But I don't think Nick is suppressing his true self. I think Nikocado is a way for Nick to actually express himself, but he's constantly criticized and hated for it. I don't think Nikocado is some metaphorical prison holding Nicholas Perry hostage, and that Perry can only be seen when Nikocado breaks character. I think he's actually his truest self when he's on camera. He has constant breakdowns and freakouts on camera, and it's clear he uses food as a way to cope with everything around him. So what you see on camera is pretty much what you get in real life. And I hate to keep citing the same video, but his interview with Oompaville is probably Nikocado Avocado at his truest. Yes, he shits himself. Yes, he screams, cries, and eats mountains of Takis. But he also opened up about his struggles with his weight gain and his want to be better. Nikocado Avocado, for the most part, is Nick's true self, and he's hated for it. Imagine that. After years of suppression and unhappiness, Nick finally finds a way to express himself, and for whatever reason, some people are actually interested in listening. But a majority of people hate his supposed character, which in reality is just him. He's stuck in an impossible position. If he stops eating, there's no telling what happens to him or his channel. But if he keeps eating, he won't have a career to worry about. And that is the tragedy, the impossible paradox that Nick finds himself in. He is genuinely entertaining, and he'd still have a following if he stopped his mukbangs, but there's no guarantee he'd make enough money to live on. And it's not like he eats just because of the views, they're just a contributing factor. Food is obviously Nick's comfort. It's a coping mechanism. He doesn't have much anymore, and food's one of the constants he can rely on. The views help, sure, but he enjoys eating. He wouldn't have put his health in jeopardy if he didn't. If Nick put down his camera today and retired from YouTube, his health might improve to a better quality, but it's unlikely any radical changes would occur because Nick enjoys eating. His YouTube channel sort of enables his binge eating, justifying his unhealthy portions as work or furthering his career. But even without it, Nick would probably retain his weight. The point I'm trying to make is that Nick doesn't eat for YouTube, he eats for himself. He eats because he enjoys it. It's a destructive coping mechanism, sure, but it's one he's developed nonetheless. The only way I can see Nick not only improve his overall health, but also keep his viewers is if he starts a weight loss journey. Now, I'm not saying he has to turn into C-Bum and become a fitness YouTuber, but if he posted an update every week or two, they easily could pull 500,000 views or more, and his CPM would be much higher, meaning he would make a lot more money. And yeah, 500k a video is a lot less than he pulls now, but I think that sacrifice is worth it for not only his physical health, but his mental health. And I'm just talking about what his average weight loss videos would get. Obviously, the first couple would clear a few million and probably break the internet. Hell, Nick could post a mukbang at the gym and it would do well. Now, I would like to point out, all of this is a lot easier said than done. Yes, Nick is an absolutely incredible entertainer and personality, and yes, to some extent, he does know what he's doing. I think that's impossible to argue given his consistent views and relevance. But again, none of this success is guaranteed, and working out, especially at his size, is harder than it is for the average person. So, let's run through a parallel universe. One where Nick sees this video and decides enough is enough. He decides to eat healthy, work out, and share his weight loss journey online. People are encouraging and finally supportive. No one's negatively commenting about his weight, and people are proud of him, but his views have declined massively. He's gone from a couple million views to, at most, a few 100,000. He's not making enough money to sustain his lifestyle anymore, so what does he do? Does he once again put his his health in jeopardy and sell out for views, or does he keep posting gym content and barely make enough to get by? It's an impossible situation, and there's no guarantee Nick wins. He either gambles his career and betters his health, or he gambles his life and sustains his career. Plus, even if he did work out, there's no telling whether his diet would change or not, so we can't say for sure that Nick just going to the gym would be the change to turn his life around. Nick can entertain an audience. He can retain viewers. His personality is incredible and his content is gripping. He is, for the most part, himself, and people clearly find that appealing, but it's dangerous. His character is dangerous. His videos are dangerous. He could stop. He could focus on his health, possibly sacrifice his career and better himself, but where would that get him? Nick has stated numerous times that he's nearly broke. He already earns a lot less money than people with his views normally do, and his financial security is basically non-existent. His relationship with his divorced husband is struggling, to say the least. He's hated on the internet, and people are constantly criticizing him. Nick is a human being. He has feelings, he has passions. He's not just an internet persona who immediately flips a switch for the camera, but he's hated both at home and on the internet. The only place where he's sometimes appreciated is under his own videos, and even then it's a mixed bag. I'm not sure what'll happen to Nick, and I'm not sure what his content will look like in 5 years. Of course, there is hope for change, but that change comes with drastic repercussions. Then again, with no change, he'll meet even worse consequences. Nick is stuck, both unable and unwilling to change. His character has mostly taken over, and despite his entertaining personality, he's quite a polarizing figure. Nick's continuance of his current habits will eventually kill him, and with no signs of stopping, it feels like we're not far from that future. People find him funny, his breakdowns and his crying. People think that's entertainment. Watching him consume thousands and thousands of calories provides viewers with a little bit of happiness, but 10 years from now, if Nick's habits catch up with him, only then it'll be tragic. People will look back at his videos pointing out the prevalent signs of his mental illness and call it a tragedy, but his story isn't defined by his ending. Currently, we're watching Nikocado's tragedy unfold with front row tickets, and his story doesn't end as a tragedy because it's always been one. The crying, the screaming, the breakdowns, we're slowly watching a man's life collapse. We've gone through his entire story, watching the rising action and the climax demanding entertainment, but now we're in the falling action. Nikocado's story is almost over, and the resolution is predictably tragic. The only hope now is that Nick's story is just beginning, and we've yet to hit the climax, or the turning point, but there's no telling exactly where we are, and no one knows how Nick's story will end. The only thing we can do is encourage Nick to change, and hopefully he will. But for now, the show must go on, and his story will continue, until one day, that tragic ending eventually catches up with him.
Hey, life is about happiness, your state of happiness. Doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter how popular you are, how many subscribers you have or viewers. It's really about being happy in the moment.
You are what you eat. So whenever possible, eat from the earth and you will feel alive.